everybody. It is Rose Mitchell with Red Tulip for Parkinson's Awareness, and today I have the honor to be on this call with Steve Yellen, who we had the privilege of meeting at the World Parkinson's Congress. Gosh, was that 2 weeks ago? And also on the meeting here is Red Tulip's founder, Anita Dust. So thank you guys. It's nice to see all your faces again. Steve came to our Red Tulip booth a couple of days. We had got to get to know Steve by hanging out at the booth. He also has a really cool tattoo, probably one of the best I've seen, displaying his symbol of courage, his badge of honor, with the Red Tulip logo, the Parkinson's logo on his shoulder, which is cool. So we're just here to get to know Steve a little bit. Steve's also an author. He's had Parkinson's disease for 7 years, and during that time, he's really come up with strategies to take his health into his own hands and to also share with the world some of the ways that he's learned to cope with it and hopefully give other people inspiration and tips to manage their own disease, manage their own personalities as they're driving through their own illness. So, Steve, welcome. It's good to
Thanks
see
for
you
having me,
again.
Rose. Thanks you. I think you captured everything really well. So I'm not sure you're leaving me that much to say, but details. But you did a great job of introducing me.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, we're excited to have you, and we're also excited to share with people about your book and where they can find your book. But, more importantly, I'm always curious about someone's journey with Parkinson's, and you've had this disease now for 7 years, and it seems like you've really taken the bull by the horns. And we're just curious if you want to walk us through kind of those early days and what's inspired you to get as far as you have with all this inspiration.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and it's kind of all linked from the beginning. So about a little over 7 years ago, my wife noticed in bed that I had a tremor in my left hand. And I assumed, I was kind of a weekend athlete. I'd play football, basketball, it was a nerve problem or a muscle issue. But I went to the doctor, and then my doctor originally said, I wouldn't worry about it. A couple months later, I went back and he referred me to a neurologist. The neurologist had me open my hands, stamp my feet, which I didn't know why, but we all know that's a UPDRS exam now. And he walked out of the room and he came back in and he said, "You have Parkinson's disease," which are some words that pretty much changed my life at that point. But he also said something else which stuck with me too, for good or for bad, which he said, "Parkinson's doesn't significantly impact your life expectancy." And I always say, it did take me 2 to 3 days to get the guts up to actually Google Parkinson's life expectancy because I was a little afraid of what I'd see. But I went for a second opinion in New York. I'm based in Connecticut. I went for a second opinion in New York to see if the diagnosis was correct. Doctor said the exact same thing. It also said, yes, it doesn't significantly impact your life expectancy. And the doctor also said some interesting things. He said, well, since it's just Parkinson's, you could see somebody local at Yale. And I'm thinking, here I'm 55 years old, he's telling me it's just Parkinson's. But I ended up going to see another doctor at Yale who I see permanently now. And he said the same thing. And what was interesting was I wasn't in denial, but I kind of compartmentalized it all. And I kind of put it in the back of my brain as the way I look at it and just live my life. When I left my first doctor's appointment, I called my wife, told her, went to work. Got home, we talked about it. And I tried to stay in decent shape and be healthy, eat healthy, but I didn't really change anything because I had a small tremor and that was it. 2 years later, what comes around is my doctor says to me, Steve, I think you're getting a little bit of rigidity. I think we should put you on medication. And that was kind of the shock. That was what I call in my book, my moment one, when it kind of really a spark went off where I said, this is kind of a step back. The disease must be gaining on me. This is something I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. And it kind of made me regret that those first 2 years I didn't get more proactive. But I decided, okay, I got to take charge of this thing. And I'm an engineer by training. I do love problem solving. I'm kind of a data nerd. So I learned everything I could. I took chapters in a neuroscience class at Duke University online to learn about neurotransmission, which I could understand. I learned everything I could about, your attitude, your proactivity, about exercise, about wellness, about, just about Parkinson's, almost like a know your enemy type of thing. And I was talking to a friend a couple of years ago who's a professional author. And he said, Steve, the way you approach this is kind of interesting. Have you thought about writing a book? And I said, no. And then he asked me again another time, and I said, still no. And then he called me at a weak moment, New Year's Eve, 2024. And I said, how would this work? And he said, well, I'll just kind of coach you along the way and we'll see how it goes. And he didn't expect it to get anywhere. But 9 months later, I had a manuscript, and 12 months later, I had the first copy in my hand. And what it really is, if I boil it down, is I did a lot of research because it's just the type of person I am. And I built a whole framework for myself of how I want to take on Parkinson's head on. And I kind of try to put that all in the book in very, very easy to use, different tips and tricks. Different people can take different ones to go to run with. And it's just a way of anybody could do what I did, but instead of taking 4 or 5 years to do it and all that research, they could do it in 3 hours by just skimming through the book. And I always really try to acknowledge that everybody's journey is different, everybody's wired differently. So this isn't a recipe, it's basically a menu of things you could choose and see what's right for you. And that's kind of the way I approached my whole journey, my kind of change from being a little bit less proactive to more proactive, and what eventually got me into now being referred to as an author, which I still don't consider myself.
That's awesome, Steve. And I want to commend you for your strength and determination to think of this in a way that you have some control over. And I think that's what's important about the way that you are approaching this book is because not everybody is going to have that attitude. And maybe having a manuscript in front of them that gives them detailed outline of things they don't even know they don't know, I would think would be very helpful for people. So, Anita, you have downloaded the Kindle version of this book, and what has been your initial thoughts about what you're reading?
Well, to be honest, Steve, I started reading the book only because I wanted to support you. Because I initially thought, oh, it's another book on Parkinson's, and I've done some reading since my diagnosis 3 years ago too. But it surprised me. It's really a good book. I'm actually loving it, and I feel like you took my beliefs and my philosophy and put them on steroids and said it all much better than I ever could have done. But the way you lay out the different chapters, about especially the first chapter, it has to do with the mindset. And the mindset makes all the difference in the world. And then you have the part about exercise and part about nutrition. And you did divide it up very well where people can use it as a reference. And I've already recommended it to 2 people. And I downloaded it on Kindle to start with it, but now I've also ordered my own hard copy as well to keep around. Plus, then I can put your autograph in my hard copy too. So I have my own signed copy. But I was really wondering as I read it too, what motivated you? What was your true motivation in writing it? What do you want to accomplish with having this?
It's interesting. In terms of writing it, it was really an interesting journey because, a friend of mine said, why don't you try to do this? And at first I was like, this seems like something I could do to keep myself busy, a little side project. As I got going, it kind of evolved into kind of a formula, like you said, where we kind of have these 7 strategies. We broke it down. And with each one, I try to tell a little bit about my story, how I got there, but mostly about I interviewed somebody, as you know, and I spoke to an expert. And I also gave people real world things that they could try to get going and do. And as it kind of evolved, I'll be honest, it was once I get motivated on something, I want to finish it. Like that goes to the whole attitude that you mentioned. But the feedback has been really interesting. Once a week I get a message on Facebook or somewhere where somebody just reaches out of the blue and says, I read this book and it really, really helped me out. Or I'll get on I've been joining a lot of support groups, and 2 or 3 people will give me, the support group leader will get back to me and said, we had a big chat after the group and people really were motivated and inspired. And what it really has come down to now, which has been incredible for me, is, I would, if I had a choice of not having Parkinson's, I'd probably take it. But the fact that I have it, the best thing I could do with it in the world is to help other people on their journey, even a little bit. And if I can just help, if people like you say, I knew a lot of stuff, but I picked up 1 or 2 good pointers from you. Some people maybe haven't done much and they pick up 10 or 12 pointers. I almost feel like what more could somebody do with their lives to accomplish something than that? And it's really given me a new purpose, like this purpose of kind of just trying to be as much of an advocate as I can, speaking to as many people as I can. And the feedback I get gives me more motivation and it feeds my attitude and my self-efficacy, as we talked about, that's in the book that we taught. So it's really kind of evolved as, originally it went from a side project to something that got kind of exciting. to something that I've said to people, I honestly feel like it's really helping people. And since it's been out, it's been like one of the top 4 or 5 sellers, along with Ray Dorsey, Mike Logan, and Michael J. Fox. So apparently people are actually buying it and they're getting good feedback from them. So it's been a real interesting journey and just turned into something I never expected.
That's great. I have a question about, you refer to this as a side project, and you were still pretty early into your diagnosis, it sounds like, when you first considered, thinking that you were young, you were strong, you still had everything intact. This disease ended up sneaking up on you a little bit. So do you feel like through the process of the research and writing this book that you became kind of your own mentor as you were discovering all of these things?
It might have actually been earlier, because like what I was doing is I didn't really do the research for the book. I did the research for myself for the past, let's say, 4 or 5 years. And then what my friend convinced me to do was to kind of codify it in the book. So I mentioned I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer by trade that likes to problem solve, but I've eventually got into marketing, and that's what I do now. And as a marketer, what you like to do is package things up in a very easy to digest way. And that's where the kind of 7 strategies came out to say, here's 7 ways you can approach this. 2 of them are foundational: your attitude and your education. So it's how proactive you are and what you learned about your enemy, or Parkinson's of this. Then there's 3 about what you can really do for yourself, which is your support structure, exercise, and wellness. And then the last 2 are a little bit more about how it helps you, but also you can help the overall cause, which is advocacy and research. And there's benefits to people for every one of those. I don't expect anybody to copy my exact journey because we're all different. But again, if they adapt a couple of these things to themselves, maybe they'll just improve their journey a little bit.
One of the things I wondered when I was reading the book, and that I think about a lot myself in my own life, is when people, especially they're first starting their journey and they read your book, I think they're going to be wondering, how do you do all of this? So do you still work? I mean, how do you schedule everything? Because when I read that book, it's like you are doing a lot. And I know all that I do to manage my Parkinson's. So how time management, can you talk about that?
I'm probably decent at time management. I've gotten a little better over the years. I do work full time. I work from home, and that's a big advantage, because working from home, I don't have commute time. I have lunch breaks. Sometimes I can basically just fit something in. If I have a spare half hour during the day, I'll go for a walk or go to my basement and do a little bit of a workout. But again, I've gotten in a routine. It is getting pretty busy now with the book, with work, with trying to keep up with the exercise in particular. But again, to me, it's a question of, don't look at. I try to be very, very clear, whether it's exercise or anything, or even just the whole package. What you do is your goals, and what I do are my goals. And nobody should judge themselves by somebody else's. Like, I do some pretty aggressive exercise goals, but there's people that do a lot more than I do. I know people that still do marathons, and I could never do a marathon. In my 20s, I could never do that. But I measure myself only against what I want to accomplish. And I think that's something I try to hopefully lead people with, which is, and I don't really like to talk about, especially with the exercise or the events I do, some of the things I do, because I think that's completely irrelevant. So I try to fit everything in. I do the best I can. There's certain things that we all compromise because we always have to prioritize. But I do feel like, again, for anybody new reading the book, just look at it as a menu. You don't have to do everything. You just have to pick and choose the ones that maybe make the most sense for you, that you feel will be best for you. I typically don't do exercise classes. I like to exercise on my own, and I fit it in. Some people love things like dance for PD, rock steady boxing, ping pong for Parkinson's. That's fantastic. So, I mean, to me, it's just setting that goal and trying to hit it and keep yourself moving in that case.
From a family perspective, I really admire what you've done about including the family and everything that you're doing too. And I'm sure that's had an impact on your time management, because sometimes you want to spend time with family, sometimes you need to do your other things, but it sounds like you've incorporated a lot of family activities into your activities, so they support each other in that way. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that helps drive this self-efficacy and attitude that I talk about in the book. One of the big ways to drive self-efficacy is support. And for example, I have one son that does certain activities with me, like Spartan races. I have a daughter that's doing a triathlon with me, and a son that's climbing the Empire State Building stairs with me. So the different ones do different things. And I've gone to Washington twice with the Fox Foundation to do advocacy, and I took my daughter on one trip and my son on the other. And in all honesty, those were trips that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. I mean, here I'm in the Capitol building with my daughter, meeting with this U.S. senator, and we're advocating for Parkinson's together. I mean, how could you have a better memory like that, a life memory? So not only have they been able to be with me, but they've also supported me and kind of done what they can to try to help me in my efforts wherever they could possibly.
And kind of a follow-up question with that, or a comment that maybe you could just remark on. I've heard people say they did not tell anybody about having Parkinson's and they found out that they're embarrassed by it. And I know my approach was kind of, my husband and I, we didn't really even talk about doing it, but we just sort of unconsciously decided we told everybody. And I wanted people to feel comfortable talking to me about it, asking me questions. And yes, if I'm shaking when I'm eating or something, I would prefer that I'm not, but at least people know that why I am. And so I'm not embarrassed by it because it's not something I can help, you know. So that's been my philosophy. And what are your thoughts on that? And what would you advise somebody that's feeling embarrassed about it?
You know, what I did personally when I first got diagnosed, I don't think there was very many visible symbols at all. Nobody would have noticed at first. I told my family immediately, and I told my close friends, and I didn't hold anything back. I didn't go out of my way to tell people. The only place I was a little bit reserved was like putting it on the internet. And only because as you know, once something's on the internet, it's out there, it's permanent. So I just kind of I tend to keep my professional and personal side separate. So I kind of, on the personal side, I completely told everybody, but you know, my company knows now, people know now, and I have no problem with it. In terms of advice, you know, I kind of refer back to what I always say throughout almost all these things, which is everybody's Parkinson's is different and everybody's wired differently themselves, their brain, and everybody's situation is different. So I would never tell anybody what you should do or could do. I would say, though, that most of the people I've spoken with have said things like, you know, wow, people were much more accommodating than I thought, whether it was professionally or personally. I've really heard very few negative stories, you know, only a couple. But again, I try to be very cognizant of saying, look, I've never walked 100 yards in your shoes. So I don't know what it feels like to be you, what your situation is. I can just tell you what my journey was like, what I've learned, and what could be a possibility for you. And I really try to keep that consideration with everything from, you know, who you tell about your diagnosis to what you do as a result of it.
I'm not somebody who has Parkinson's disease, but I'm fortunate to run in circles with some amazing people in this community, and it floors me over and over again how many people that we've run into, that I've had conversations with, who will say comments like, I was always so introverted before Parkinson's. I would go to church and not talk to anybody. You know, it was hard for me to go out with my friends before Parkinson's. They just weren't, had, I don't know, no, felt like they didn't have a reason to, or have a purpose. And then to turn around and say, now I feel like I have a purpose in my life. Now I have something I feel that I need to explain to people so that they understand it. Now I want people to talk to me and ask questions. And I think that's so important for the general public, because, and even, for kids who still have the stigma around Parkinson's disease. And how do you both feel about, really getting more advocacy out there through social media, through these conversations, to tell people with Parkinson's that this is important? This isn't something that you're going to be able to hide from. So try to find your why, try to find your reason, and invite people to ask you questions. Is that something, obviously, you guys both agree with, but how do you feel that the general Parkinson's population feels about being that open, and in the comings and goings with people that you've met that have Parkinson's? Do you feel that most people don't have this attitude?
It's really interesting. I've seen the gamut. So, I mean, the thing is, I think you brought up a really interesting angle on advocacy, which is one of the chapters in the book about what people can do, because it can actually make you feel better. And I think everybody has to decide like what kind of advocacy they like. There's people that are heavy on social media. I've tried to do a lot. So I'm a Parkinson's Foundation ambassador. I'm a research advocate. I review grants for the Parkinson's Foundation. I go try to pitch to, what I enjoy probably even more than that is basically advocating with government, because I enjoy speaking. I enjoy public speaking. I've been a company spokesman in my career. So I enjoy that part of it. And I do enjoy, now that I have the book and the framework of living Parkinson's, getting out there and trying to help people too, like we talked about earlier. But it's really interesting what you say. Some people it can change them tremendously. But then there are some people that I know. I've had friends say, "Hey, I know somebody has Parkinson's. Do you mind if he calls you?" And I said, "Of course not. I'll meet him for coffee and chat with him." And they never call. So some people just, and I think again, it depends on the person, depends on their reaction. I don't think it's really a one size fits all, but I do think if you can find that niche that you like of advocacy, like you said, it might actually not only bring you out of your shell a little bit, but it actually gives you a feeling of control. And I'd love to talk about that after, we hear some more feedback. But that's something that I've learned that a lot of people have in common, is that feeling of control really helps them.
I was just going to say, I agree with everything you said there, Steve. And I never dreamed about becoming an advocate, and I kind of did it by accident, as Rose knows my story. And Steve, you know a little bit about it, the fact that I got into being an advocate after reading Dr. Dorsey's book about the need for a campaign for Red Tulip, like AIDS had, like the pink ribbon for breast cancer and all of that. And I feel like the Parkinson's community does a great job of getting information to each other. My big question for myself and for you and for everybody in the Parkinson's community is, how do we get this outside of the Parkinson's community so that we get the rest of the world involved? Because one of the things that's hit me recently is that even though it's the fastest growing disease in the world, and it's growing ever faster, and there's 1.1 million people in the US with it, that 1.1 million is less than 0.5% of the population. When it's that small of a percentage, it's hard to get the people's attention that don't have Parkinson's. So I feel like we have to figure out a way to get it beyond. And that's one reason why Rose has a symbol and I have a symbol on that says Red Tulip for Parkinson's Awareness. And so any ideas that you have today or in the future, Steve, about how we expand this to outside of the Parkinson's community, we would be very interested in that.
Well, it is interesting, Anita, that one of the things, unfortunately, is, I know you mentioned less than 1%. That's 1 out of 100 people. What I do find is almost everybody I talk to knows somebody, whether it's an older relative or somebody else that has it. Because again, we're all in circles of 40 or 50, maybe just family members and close friends. So it's unfortunate that more and more people are getting exposed to it second, third hand just by knowing people. But ironically, I even feel like things like the show Shrinking, which has been out there, with Michael J. Fox on it and with Harrison Ford, even that's gotten Parkinson's a little more prominent. I consider myself starting my advocacy maybe 2-3 years ago when I was pitching the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. And even over those 3 years, I see more social media people pitching. There's more people involved in going to Washington. So I do think that there's getting to be more of a groundswell. It's unfortunate that there is, because it means more people are getting the disease, which, like you said, it's the fastest growing neurological disorder. But it feels to me, not being, again, I don't consider myself being an expert, but it feels to me like it is getting more and more out there, more prevalent, more people know about it, and you're hearing about it because of people like Ray Dorsey, Michael Loken, because of advocates that are out there on social media, and just people like us, hopefully.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And it's also an interesting question to think, do we think that there is more awareness and advocacy happening because we're involved in the Parkinson's community, or is it still this well-kept secret that the general public really doesn't understand? And I think, that's the kind of work and the mission behind the Red Tulip, is to get outside of the walls of these communities. And, even though Parkinson's is not just affecting the individual, it's affecting the spouse, the children, the grandchildren, the people that they work with, friends, family. There's still people who have never been exposed to it, who don't understand it. And that's the real work we have in front of us. Because I always tell people that I meet who say they don't know anybody with Parkinson's, I always say to them, you will. And so you need to start to understand this. So Steve, from your perspective, this is kind of a very general question, but what do you wish people understood about Parkinson's disease?
Wow, I've never been asked that. That's a tough question. I guess the general population you're thinking.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the thing that jumps out to me the most is I've gotten pretty close to Ray Dorsey. I saw him speak at Yale here locally to me a couple weeks ago, and as you probably know, only 13% of the people with Parkinson's now have one of the genes that are attributed to it. So, which means 87% of the people, the reason can be environmental is a cause. I think really understanding that there's a really good probability that things in our own environment are impacting us and causing the increase is something that I'd want people to know, because there are steps everybody can take, not only people with Parkinson's to maybe slow the progression, but everybody can take. And that's kind of what I've tried to do with my kind of lifestyle, is live a lifestyle, and I try to evangelize that with my kids. So I don't have the genes, so there's less of a reason to believe they're have a chance of getting it, but I want to minimize that chance. So just trying to live a healthier life, less toxins in your life, a more all natural life. I think there's small steps everybody can take that aren't going to necessarily impact your quality of life. You're not going to give away all the good things you enjoy in life, but maybe take steps to just improve a couple of things to maybe lower your risk. That's probably what I'd want to get out there if I could get something out there.
Anita, how do you feel about that when you think of the general public? What do you wish, for example, that a stranger down the street, you got to know, maybe sitting on a park bench, found out that you told them you had Parkinson's. What do you wish that would pop into that person's brain automatically?
I think what Steve said about the toxins and the environmental risk, and it's so hard to prove it as an absolute, although I think that we have some scientists that have proved it significantly enough that some of our toxins, some of the chemicals should be banned, like paraquat's the big one right now that both the Parkinson's Foundation and Fox and others are pushing to eliminate. So I wish people had a better understanding of that, so they just paid attention. For example, we have had our yard sprayed for mosquitoes for years. And after I learned about the chemicals and stuff, I checked with what they sprayed with. And I don't know that what they sprayed with was harmful, but I did have them change. And now they use an essential oil type thing to spray. And I have not noticed any increase in mosquitoes. And I certainly feel better about what I'm breathing outside of my own yard. And so
your
I wish
family,
people
yeah.
just knew more about the risks that are out there.
I love that. And good. I didn't know that about the mosquito. I mean, it makes sense that the chemicals, but that's really awesome that you were able to find a different, less chemical. You said what it was, essential oil, and those kinds of stories need to be told. That if that's working for you, regardless if you have Parkinson's in your family or not, why isn't everybody aware of these more holistic chemicals that we all should be using? These chemicals float into our neighbors' yards. They're floating into the water tables. And I don't know whose job it is to do that kind of advocacy, but it just doesn't seem like people become aware of it until there's already an issue, unfortunately.
And I'll add one thing too, something that Steve, you had in your book that I agree with, but my doctor didn't say this, because when I was asking about still being exposed to something, the doctor's response was, well, you already have Parkinson's, so you probably don't need to worry about it. And Steve, you had something in the book, I don't remember specifically what it was, but something about contain your exposure so you can try to lessen the exposure so it won't get worse. And that's exactly how I looked at it too. It's like, well, if I continue to expose myself, am I speeding up the process and it progresses faster? So I was kind of surprised that my doctor didn't say the same thing, because my doctor's a movement disorder specialist, and I would have thought that would have been the response, but it wasn't. So sometimes my overall philosophy about doctors anyway is take in everything they say, analyze it, and see what fits for me. So that's kind of what I did in this instance.
I agree. And it's interesting. One of the things I learned that was one of the more interesting tidbits is, everybody reacts differently to medications. Some of them work better for people than others, and we all react differently to toxins. So, for example, it could be that air pollution caused my Parkinson's, but it didn't cause yours. And in that case, if I knew that, could stay away from it, and I can frankly keep my family away from it because they have the same genes as I do. So, that kind of stuff was really interesting. That that if it is environment, it could be something different for everybody because we just have a different susceptibility to it. Just we have different reactions to medications and other things, and that's where trying to improve. Again, just live a healthier life moving forward. I feel like the way I describe in the book is wellness overall. I look at it as that it's hard to say what it's going to do, but it can maybe tilt the playing field in your favor a little bit. So it could just maybe make everything a little bit easier. Maybe it just slows all progression down a little bit by eating a better diet, getting more sleep, staying away from toxins, exercising more. All that together, again, maybe just helps a little bit, but if it just reduces that slope of progression a little bit over 10, 20, 30 years, that can be a lot. And I'll take that.
And Dr. Dorsey made a statement when he was here for a book signing, and I had a chance to talk to him one-on-one for a minute, and was asking him about the chemicals and why, if the chemicals are bad, then why doesn't everybody get it and why some people don't? And I was asking him that from just an educational standpoint, not saying he wasn't right. But his answer to that was, well, it's like cigarettes. We know that cigarette smoking causes cancer, but not everyone that smokes gets cancer.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the perfect analogy for it.
Wow.
No, that is, and that's exactly what he said to me in those different words, but you're absolutely right.
Wow. So Steve, we only have about less than 5 minutes. Something's been on my mind since we discussed at length your involvement in Spartan races. And have you ever considered getting together a group of individuals that have Parkinson's and their families, a big group, to do these races together and possibly promote other, groups in the community, in these communities throughout the country, and perhaps wear the red Tulip for Parkinson's awareness logo on a jersey? And since that's kind of one of your things, and there's a lot of people that I personally know that love those Spartan races and those muddy buddy races. But is that something that you would ever consider? And would you ever honor us by wearing the red Tulip for Parkinson's awareness logo?
Well, I would say I've got the red Tulip to some extent on me at all times. So, but I would definitely do that. Yeah, in terms of doing it with other people, I've thought about it. I've talked to some people locally, but I haven't met as many people in my area. Like the Spartan races that I do in particular are few and far between. They don't have that many, and they're usually pretty far to get to. So there's a lot of logistics associated with it. But I mean, the short answer is I would definitely be interested in doing it. I've even talked to the Spartan about the people of Spartan if they ever wanted to do a story about the fact that people with Parkinson's can still do it, because I've done about 12 obstacle course races the last 3 years, and I have another one in 2 weeks. So, but no, I would definitely be interested in doing something like that. And yeah, the red Tulip, I would obviously wear that with pride. Like I said, I also have my Team Yellen outfit that me and the kids all wear, so I would have to figure out a place to put the sticker or something.
We can find a place for the logo.
I'd be honored to do that.
Well, I think coming off the tail end of, Jimmy Choi and being the Fox Ninja, and every time he does a American Ninja Warrior show, they do extensive, promotion about Parkinson's disease, and that's great for the community. We just had a guy here in Indianapolis, Steve Bean. He ran the Boston Marathon for the second time at 80 years old, and once again, they picked up that story and it was told and through multiple mediums. And so I just think, the more we can get out there, 'cause people, and especially younger people, are paying attention to these really cool things, and to be able to see people with Parkinson's and learn more about it, it's just another sneaky way to get that advocacy and awareness out there. So thanks for the consideration. I would do it.
It's interesting. It's a double-edged sword. I would love to do that, and I mean, I would do that anytime if anybody approached me about getting the story out there. So if you know somebody that would be interested, I'd love to do that. But I also want to I never want to set the bar too high and make it look that way. Like I try not to talk about, well, just I do Spartan races and I do this and I do that because like I can never do a marathon. And you mentioned about the person doing a marathon. Like for me, I'm okay seeing that because I know that my goals are my goals, but I would never want somebody to say, well, look, he's doing Spartans, he's doing this. I'm not sure I could do that. So I'm not even going to bother reading the book or buying the book or trying to improve anything. So I feel like there's a little bit of I try to be like, don't want to put those goals out there as much because I don't think it's about doing a Spartan. I mean, I think that's an interesting story. It's kind of fun and I enjoy doing them. But to me, what I'm really trying to evangelize with people is just get moving, do a little bit more than you did before, set a goal. When you achieve that goal, let it fuel your fire to get on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's how you'll stick to this and that's how you'll beat this thing. So, I mean, there's kind of the two messages there. My main message is just get up and set a goal. It doesn't matter what it is. But on the other hand, I do appreciate what you're saying. It would make a neat story. And if anybody watching this wants to contact me and film me doing a Spartan, I'm completely open to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective because you're so right. And Jimmy Choi also talks about the same concept where, what you guys are able to do is what you're able to do, and you're pushing yourself a little bit more. But for somebody who's maybe never exercised a day in their life and have been confined to, a lazy boy that don't have the motivation, if they can get the motivation to get up, get out of the house, go to a group class and just push around some balls and some weights and come back up, that's more than they would have done had they not had the inspiration to do that. So that's a whole nother message that I think people need to really start to grasp.
And I mean, look, I can never do what Jimmy Choi does. I watch some of the things he does, and it's not even. If I tried to do them,
Nobody can do what he does.
So I mean, the thing is, but I'm very comfortable saying, look, I set my own goals.
Yep.
When I do one of these events, some of the events I do, I come in near last, but that's okay because my goal is to finish. And even when I finish, it's near last. It's a success in my mind. So that's the key thing.
We are almost finished here. So before it just cuts us off, Steve, we want to thank you so much for your vulnerability and everything that you're doing for the Parkinson's community. Anita, any last words?
Just thank you, Steve. I agree with her. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the book you wrote. It even gave me some new information that I didn't expect. So thank you.
It's great.
Look, I really appreciate it. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me too.
Yep. We'll be in touch. See you at the next event.
Sounds good.
Bye.